Look at the Sichas Chelek Yud the Sicha of Nitzavim Gimel. A short, relatively short Sicha with a beautiful word. Very very typical. So in Parshas Nitzavim, beginning of Perek Lamed, the pasuk says, "V'haya ki yaveyu alecha kol hadvarim haela, habracha v'haklala." It will be when these things will come upon you, the bracha, the blessing, and the curse. Asher nasati lefanecha, which I have placed before you. V'hashiveisa el levavecha, b'chal hagoyim asher yidichecha Hashem alekecha shama. You should take it to heart amongst all the nations that you have been banished there by the Eibishter. V'shavta Hashem alekecha, you should return to the Eibishter. V'shamaita b'keila, you should listen to his voice. K'chel asher anechi mitzavcha hayom, as everything that I have taught you today. Ata uvanecha, you and your children. V'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha, with all your heart and with all your soul. So this is the pasuk upon which the Sikha is based. It's not really a Rashi Sikha, but we're going to ask why Rashi does not address this central question that we're going to have on this pasuk. It will be when these things will come upon you, the bracha and the klala, you will take it to heart amongst all the goyim where you have been sent or you have been dispersed. You will return to the Eibishter with all of your heart and with all of your soul. Move on. So as we continue through the parasha, we understand that the general intent, the direction of the psukim is that in the end of times, in the end of the situation, Yoshuv kol echad mibnei Yisrael b'tshuva shleima la'avaya, every Yid will return to the Eibishter with full tshuva. Hainu shagam mishavar al darach Hashem v'chulu, even someone who transgressed the ways of Hashem. But if or when all of these things happen to him, especially the klala, he'll be awakened, he'll be inspired to take things to heart, until it reaches a point that he returns to the Eibishter. But based on this, we have a question on the word habracha. The pasuk says, if all of this is going to come upon you, the bracha and the klala. I can understand something that is the opposite of good. Who gave him l'shviras halev, causes the person to be brokenhearted. And this awakens him to do tshuva. But how is a person going to be awakened or inspired to do tshuva if he has brachas? Just by receiving brachas from the Eibishter, blessings from Hashem, how does this motivate a person to tshuva? When something happens that's not good, so why did it happen? How did it happen? What can I do to stop it from happening? And hopefully it leads the person to tshuva. But if a person is receiving brachas from the Eibishter, how does that lead a person to tshuva? And since this is a question even in the basic understanding of the pasuk, there's another question here. Why is there not even a hint to this question and to its resolution in Rashi? Which Rashi's purpose is to explain and to resolve anything that is questionable and demands an explanation of Pshuti Shel Mikra. Therefore, we must come to the conclusion. There's a gufa echacha shel Pshuti Shel Mikra ein makam l'kushuzu meikara. That in Pshuti Shel Mikra there's no question here, and why not? So basically, our question is clearly the habracha is not a stira to our question: how does a person become inspired to do tshuva just because he received brachas? Now, The question is, when the psukim continue, V'shavta ad Hashem Elokecha, V'shav Hashem Elokecha Shvuscha, what is the content of the pasuk? What is the direction of the pasuk? Is it telling us that if these things will happen to you, then you should do kach v'kach, you should return to Hashem, or is it prophesizing that this is the future, this is what's going to happen? Which one is it? Is it this is what you should do, or this is what's going to happen? We can't say that these psukim, V'shavta Hashem Elokecha, V'shav Hashem Elokecha Shvuscha, V'aviach Hashem Elokecha al Aretz, we cannot say that the meaning of these words is Moshe Rabbeinu telling the future in a nevuah, in a prophecy. As part of the events that are going to occur to the Jewish people. And therefore it says the word abracha, and specifically before the word aklala, because that is what will be in the prophecy, and that is what actually did occur in the chronological order of events when the Yidden came to Eretz Yisrael. The early days in Eretz Yisrael will be days of bracha, days of blessing and goodness for the Yidden. And at a later date, when the Yidden will sin, then the opposite of good will come upon them. So we can't say that that's the pshat, even though it would fit nicely. You're going to come to Eretz Yisrael, you're going to have bracha, then you're going to have klala, and ultimately, so it would fit into the psukim, but we can't say that that's the pshat. That Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the future. Aleph. Number one, Sipur HaSidis Bo Lahalon de Parshas Vayelech. The story of the future, in other words, for someone, or the Eibishter, to tell, or Moshe Rabbeinu, to tell over what is actually, to prophesize what is actually going to happen in the future, that actually happens in Parshas Vayelech. In Perek Lamed Aleph, Pasuk Tezayin, Vayemer Hashem al Moshe, Hincha Shechev Mavisecha, V'kama Amazav Ezon Achrei Elokei Nechar Haaretz. You're going to pass away. Eibishter speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu. The nation is going to rise. They're going to stray after strange gods. My anger will be inflamed on that day. I will hide my face on that day. So Parshas Vayelech has a description by the Eibishter to Moshe Rabbeinu, a prophetic vision of what is going to occur in the future. So it's hard to say that it's happening twice. That in Parashas Nitzavim there's a few psukim that are about the future, what's going to happen in the future, and then again in Parashas Vayelech. Beis haksuvim de lahalon befurish as osipur amorais asidim lavi lachar bayam le'eretz Yisrael. Those stories, that future that is related in, or prophesized rather, in Parshas Vayelech, it says clearly that these are events that are going to occur after the Yidden come to Eretz Yisrael, and lei nizker sham meinyan habracha v'hatev. There's no mention of the goodness that's going to happen to Eretz Yisrael, that's going to happen into the Yidden. In other words, the prophecy that's being told is a prophecy about the negative things. So even if this was a prophecy, it still wouldn't answer the habracha. First of all, it's not a prophecy because the prophecy is in Vayelech. And even if over there you see he's telling a whole prophecy and there's no mention of the brachas. So why would the mention of bracha be here? Logically speaking, it doesn't follow to say that the good that's going to happen in the future is something that could be discussed in advance as a prophecy. The good that's going to come upon the person is dependent on his own personal choices. As it says in the end of our parsha, in the end of parsha Nitzavim it says, you can choose life. And so too it says in the beginning of Parshas Reish, Talmud Lomdei Kfar, which there's then Chumash the Mikra, the person, the student learning Chumash already learned Re'eh, Es HaBracha Asher Tishmu, V'Aklaleim Lei Tishmu. The bracha if you listen, the klal if you don't listen. I know your rebelliousness. To become v'zana, which is why I know that you're going to stray for other gods. So we know already that there's going to be negativity. So that we know for certain. So that we can expect negative events. But brachas, we don't know because we don't know how the Yidden are going to act. We don't know that the Yidden are going to earn the brachas. Brachas is by choice of the Yidden, and if the Yidden don't earn them, they're not going to happen. So it's very hard to prophesize about a bracha that's going to come. So it's hard to say, I should say rather, as the Sikha says, it's impossible to say that these psukim here of V'shavta D'Hashem V'hoyu Kivei Lecha Kol Dvar Me'ela V'bracha V'kol V'shavta D'Hashem Lekecha is prophecies about the future. So therefore it comes out in our case that the purpose of the pasuk here, the direction of the pasuk here is not the telling of the future. They're coming to testify and let us know. If the Yidden are not going to choose to go in the ways of Hashem, and this will trigger negative events, negative consequences to the Yidden. Then these negative consequences themselves will awaken the Yidden to return with a complete tshuva. And that's what the Pesukim are telling us. But according to this, our question, we're back to square one. Now, what is the connection with the fact that the Eibishter is going to give bracha to the Jewish people, to the Yidden, and they say to tshuva, if the purpose of the Pesukim is to tell the Yidden that they're going to be awakened to tshuva through the klalis, through the dvarim alei tevim that are going to happen, how does the word ha-bracha fit into this pasuk? The explanation is as follows. The This parsha is telling us that the pain, the suffering from the klala, from the negative consequences, is going to awaken the sinner to return in with tshuva. And the pasuk ends that the tshuva will be on such a lofty level that it will permeate heart and soul. So basic logic tells us that just like the tshuva is on a very intense level, a very high level, to the point that it permeates to the depth of his heart and soul, then also the cause of the tshuva has to also be in a very intense manner. The feeling of suffering or pain of the klala, that the tsar has to be very strong tsar, very painful suffering, even more than the regular suffering that one would suffer from a klala. So in other words, if it's the negative events that are triggering his desire for tshuva, then the ultimate tshuva would be triggered by the ultimate suffering. So therefore the pasuk explains, so the bracha tells us these things are going to happen to you, bracha and klala. Let's first focus on the word klala, where it's telling us klala. So it tells us that all the different details of the klalas, which we just learned from the previous parsha and Parshas Tavei, that are going to occur to the person, are going to occur after the bracha. It is the nature of humankind, of people, that when a person experiences something negative, after a positive experience, then a person feels and the lack of the good stands out much more, both in quantity and quality, than if there was no good that came before it. The klala is so much worse because it was preceded by bracha. As it is known that a rich person, that the wheel of fortune turned on him and he became impoverished, his suffering is much greater than someone who was forever a pauper. And in addition to the fact that it's a simple, basic logic to a ben chamesh lemikra, we can also derive this from a Rashi that was brought in Parshas to the A, which is before this Parshas, so the Ben Chamesh the Mikra already learned it. The Parshas to the A, al Pasuk Dei Machsei Yashiyach Salei, Pirush Rashi talked about giving tzedakah, and it says you have to give him Dei Machsei Yashiyach Salei to suffice for the lack that he is lacking. So Rashi explains Dei Machsei, you also have to give to suffice for what's lacking. V'iyat mitzuvah la'ashirah. But you are not commanded to make him wealthy. Asher yachsar lei, then Rashi continues, that which is lacking to him. Afilu sus lirkev alav, even a horse to ride upon. The eved laretz the fun of, and a servant, a runner to run before him. These two Rashis are contradictory. If since you do not have a mitzvah to make him wealthy, you don't have to give him riches, luxuries. Why is he obligated to give him even a horse to ride upon and a runner to run before him? Which these are items of luxury. Especially if you focus specifically on these words, Allah, he's riding on the horse. The runner is running before him. He's not using it for his field. He's not using it for the worker to help him make a parnasa. They're doing nothing. They're riding on the horse. He's using the horse to ride upon, and the runner is just running in front of him. Now, it's true that this is what the Chazal said, this is what the Gemara says is the meaning of the pasuk, and therefore that's Rashi's source. But how does Rashi derive this limud, this understanding, based on Pshuta Shel Mikra? Especially since it's contradictory. On the one hand, you're telling me you don't have to make him rich, you don't have to make him wealthy. On the other hand, you're offering him items of luxury. Ella. But what's the explanation? How do you see in the pasuk that both things are true? Never, because of Dei Machsei. The pasuk says that which he is lacking. Asher yechsar loy, which he individually, he specifically is missing. So this is understood. If it's something that this person is missing, then it's not considered luxury for him. But it's something that's necessary. It's a necessity. Even if with regards to someone who is not accustomed to these luxuries, this would be considered a luxury and not a necessity. But for the person who became accustomed to it, it becomes a necessity. So both are true. You don't have to make him wealthy, but whatever this person was once accustomed to, that became part of what's considered necessity and not luxury, and therefore has to be given to him. Because move on. So from this we understand that even according to Pshuta Shel Mikra, we understand the reason why it says a bracha in the pasuk. Because with the word habracha, we understand how the feeling of the suffering brings him to this perfect tshuva. It permeates his heart and his soul. When the klala is felt with all of its intensity, because it was preceded by a bracha, then it has the power to awaken tshuva with all of its strength and with all of its intensity, with all, and therefore it reaches his heart and soul. So that's question, answer. Why does it say Abracha in the Pasuk? Because it wants to talk about this Eridus HaTshuva, and this Eridus HaTshuva comes from the suffering, and when the Bracha precedes the Klala, then the suffering of the Klala is greater, and therefore the Tshuva that comes out from that suffering, the awakening that comes out from that suffering is a much greater awakening, and therefore a much greater Tshuva. But we still have to understand the ultimate, the more general picture, besides referring to the specifics about the klala, the bracha and the klala that's going to lead to Seder Tshuva, the parsha in general is telling us that the Eibishter is going to ordain that every Yid will do Tshuva. Now that we've established that the ultimate Tshuva comes after the klala, that comes after the bracha, that only once a person receives a bracha and then a klala can he reach the ultimate Tshuva. But this is telling us, this premise, but this premise negates the fact that a person could reach ultimate Tshuva without the bracha. What happens if a person has a klala without a bracha? Then what we just basically said is that the pain is not that great, and therefore the Seder is not that great, and therefore the Tshuva is not that great. But this pasuk is saying that every Yid is going to do Tshuva, even the Yid that didn't have the bracha before the klala. So how does that work? Rabbi. The explanation is as follows. We mentioned earlier the pasuk as a bracha asher tishmur ein asati lefnecha hayim as I don't remember as Chaim I don't remember how the pasuk begins, but the next pasuk in Parashas today is a bracha asher tishmu el mitzvah Hashem lekechem va'aklova. Oh, here's the it's right here. Oh, b'tchilas Parashas today babir bezet. Let's go to the beer. B'tchilas Parashas today kasuv re'ei anechi nesen lefnechem hayim bracha uklala. I'm placing before you today bracha and klala. Es bracha asher tishmu el mitzvah Hashem v'geimer. So the pasuk over there says that the bracha asher tishmu, which let's say means if you'll listen. It doesn't mean that exactly, but let's say if you'll listen. V'aklala im lo yishmu. So now we're going to focus on the fact that it says by habracha it says asher tishmu, and by aklala it says im tishmu, or im lo yishmu rather. Mefarish Rashi explains asher tishmu al minas asher tishmu, on the condition that you will listen. The bracha is being given to you on the condition that you will listen to the Eibishter. So the pastor's kavanah say the Taretz Masha Amar HaKosav Asher Tishmu Sharei Ze Tnai Asher Tishmu. Seemingly he's coming to tell us, explain to us, what's Rashi coming to do? He's coming to explain to us why they use the word Asher Tishmu. Asher Tishmu Sharei Ze Tnai. Asher Tishmu is about telling us it's a condition that you'll get the bracha if you listen to Hashem. Im Tishmu, then it should say bracha Im Tishmu. You'll get the bracha if you listen. Just like it says immediately in the pasuk later that if by the klala im leisishmu, if you don't listen, like we said earlier in the sikha, that there's the bracha is dependent on the person's choice. Ubekolza nema pirish Rashi al menas v'loim. So the meaning of the pasuk seemingly is that you're going to get the bracha if you will listen. But Rashi doesn't teach im, Rashi teaches amenas. The mihai time gufa shashina akasav mereisha asher l'seifa im, because the pasuk changes the terminology. And earlier by habracha it says asher tishmu, and by the klala it says im tishmu, im loy tishmu. Therefore Rashi is compelled to say she'ein pirusha shel asher tishmu b'mevanet shel im tishmu, that asher doesn't mean im. Verstehst? Rashi is telling us that asher tishmu means on the condition that you listen. Why does he come lechatchila to tell you anything? Because it's asher. and not im. And now being that it says asher and not im, and by the klala it does say im, it must mean that asher has a different meaning than im. And therefore Rashi types that asher means almanas. But what's the difference? What's the difference between almanas and asher? And im? Almanas on the condition. You'll bracha, you'll get on the condition that you will listen. How is that different than the klala you'll get if you don't listen? The hefresh ben almanas le'im hu bepashtus. It's a very simple difference between almanas and im. Halashon im pirusha t'nai. Amachayev es kiyumay koidem ledavar anitin al yadai. Im means that it's a condition, but that obligates its fulfillment before receiving that which he wants to receive. Im yekayim es ha'inyan ad-darush. If he will fulfill that which is demanded of him, then he will be given his reward, which is the bracha. And that's actually what it means with regards to the opposite of the bracha. Later in the pasuk, that if you will not listen to the mitzvahs of Hashem, then, meaning after the not listening, so it means that first you have to do the if. If you will listen, then you will get. If you will not listen, then you will not get. Almanas, when you say it's on the condition, pirushai, it means sha'adavar nitin miyad, that the thing is being given right away. Elashanisinu zuhi almanas, but nice he hasn't ever played it. It's on the condition that he'll do something. He's giving it to him right away, regardless of what he did. And he's telling him, I'm giving this to you on the condition, means for the purpose of you doing something with it. And that's the pshat of Asher Tishmu, which is said by the Inyan HaBracha, which Asher said Asher means Lamanas. HaKadosh Baruch Hu Neisin Livnei Yisrael HaBracha. The Yebishter gives the bracha to the Yid. Ukedeshet Iskayvet LaBracha Zu. And in order that this bracha should remain, but Nai Asher Tishmu, they have a condition, you have to listen. The bracha comes regardless. You want to keep the bracha, you want the bracha to last, to permeate, to become a part of you, then you have to listen to the Eibishter. That's the difference in Almanas and Im. Im means first you have to listen, then you get the bracha. Almanas means the bracha you're getting anyway. And to keep the bracha, you have to listen. Fiza Nimtza comes out. The Ein Lecha Adam Yisrael Shalekibel Es HaBracha. This is the most amazing line. Lefiza Nimtza, the Ein Lecha Adam Yisrael Shalekibel Es HaBracha. There's not one Yid that didn't get the bracha from the Eibishter. Being that we're saying that the bracha comes regardless, so therefore it comes out that I shouldn't say unconditional because there is a condition that comes after it, but before we get a chance to fulfill the condition or not, every Yid receives the bracha. The Gami Shechata Upagam V'Yavar Es HaDerech. But Nenush also, even someone who sinned and caused a blemish and strayed from the path and was punished for it. After he sinned, which the punishment is the opposite of bracha. Nevertheless, at the get-go, at the starting point, the bracha was there. Then after he received the bracha, or potentially received the bracha, he then went ahead and didn't fulfill the condition of Asher Tishmu, then the opposite of bracha came upon him. So now you can't say anymore that there was no bracha before the klala. There's always a bracha before the klala. The question is how long it lasts. The question is how long it remains with you. But every single Yid receives the bracha from the Eibishter. Nimtza de'inyan ha'mavur b'parshasenu shekol ha'dvarim ha'ele shel ha'bracha v'shel ha'klala achar kach. That which it says in the parsha earlier, that all of these things that will come upon you, first bracha, and then klala, lead a person, motivate a person to do tshuva in the most intense way, that it permeates his heart and his soul. This is something that is accessible to every single Yid, because the bracha and the klala, followed by the klala, is something that every Yid is, not the klala part, but the bracha first is something that every single Yid is shaykh to, because the bracha is given to us before we get a chance to fulfill or chas v'shalom the opposite. And on this theme and this concept, we see an amazing thing, something that is specifically connected to the time leading up to Rosh Hashanah, the day of the Great Judgment. HaKadosh Baruch Hu yivtiach l'oseis l'kol echad v'echad v'nei Yisrael es habracha mibli habeit al matzavi. The Eibishter promises that He's going to give every single Yid the bracha without looking at the situation. It's just that He says the bracha will remain with a person if he's able to listen. But at the starting point, at the beginning, the Eibishter gives every single Yid a bracha. Comes Rosh Hashanah, a person stands in front of the Eibishter and is asking for brachas for the new year. The brachas are there. V'atam kimuvan, and the reason is understood. Every single Yid is a child of Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. Ubnei Yisrael b'nei melachim, we say there's melachim. Yidden are princes, children of kings. And even more so, in certain places, the Gemara says, doesn't just say b'nei melachim, they say melachim. The Yidden are kings. The Yidden are worthy that everything should be given to them completely and perfectly. As it is explained in Rabbi Mitzvah, with regards to how much food you have to give to your Jewish worker, even if you give them the su'udah, the same kind of meal that Shlomo would give in his times, and the Gemara describes over there what kind of incredible meal, how much food went, and how long it took to eat it, and the Gemara elaborates there on what the meal was, but it's something that's beyond anything that we can comprehend. You still have not fulfilled your obligation in feeding your worker because their children are and the Eibishter fulfills anything which He commands the Yidden to do. So therefore, if the Eibishter commanded us to treat another Yid by treating them like children of kings and like kings, then the Eibishter treats us that way as well by giving us brachas. And therefore, the Eibishter, every single Yid is receiving brachas from the Eibishter. And the Yesod, the Eibishter is giving us all these brachas. It is certain that everyone will fulfill the t'nai of following the mitzvahs of Hashem. And then the bracha will remain with him permanently. And in that case, his tshuva won't have to be on chatoim because he's fulfilling the asher tishmu. He's fulfilling the fact that he's listening to the Eibishter. But the tshuva will be, as it says in the pasuk, the ruach, the spirit, will return to the Eibishter that has given it. In other words, that rather than a tshuva is pshat, the person did something wrong and he has to come back from it. That he didn't do anything wrong. He's just connecting, the ruach is connecting to that telekus, to the Eibishter. That tshuva tata is pshat, coming back from chatoim v'avenis, dealing with the Yetzer Hara, the Nefesh Abamis, the Elam Hazah. The Tshuva Ilah is about connecting the neshama with Elikus. And every Yid will do this. There's no need for Tshuva Tata because there's no Chatoim, there's no Avedis, there's no Nefesh Abamis, there's no Yetzer Hara. Everything is Asher Tishmu. And especially in the Kviyas of this year, which is a Yom Tiv Shal Rosh Hashanah that falls out on Shabbos, which is actually the Kviyas of this year as well. It's the Kviyas of the year Tavshin Lamed Beis, that is when the Farbrengen was said, and it's also the Kviyas of this year that we're learning the Sikha together. It's explained in the Tshuva that Shabbos is the same Asias as Tashiv as Tshuva. And the Aveda of Shabbos is to do Tshuva to do tshuva ilah, which is b'simcha rabba, which is with great simcha. So Mela, yes, that we're talking about the bracha that the Eibush is giving every Yid. And the only thing we have to do is do tshuva ilah to be able to because we don't have to, because we have no imloi tishmus. We are keeping the bracha because asher tishmu. Therefore, the whole aved is tshuva ilah. This is very consistent with this year because Hashanah is Shabbos, and that on the day of Rosh Hashanah, rather than focusing on tshuva on chatoim v'avenis, we're focusing on Shabbos is tashiv tshuva ilah b'simcha rabba, and therefore meriting to keep the brachas that the Eibishter has already given us to each and every single Yid, regardless of their ma'amad u'matzav, because the bracha is automatic from the Eibishter.